Okay, what if I told you that right now, somebody close to you, somebody you know, is probably planning to lie to you today? And you know the scariest part? You likely won't even have a clue.
I mean, think about this. Researchers say that most of us are lied to up to 200 times every single day. And most of the time, we're completely unaware. It's happening all around us, in big ways and in small ways.
But what if you could totally flip the script? What if you could become, well, kind of like a human lie detector? The good news is, you absolutely can. Today, we are diving into the secret techniques that detectives and federal agents use to see the truth, even when someone is trying their absolute hardest to hide it. All right, let's get right into it. The first set of tools in our toolkit is all about observation. This is the foundation, right? It's what you do before you even think about asking a single question. So our first technique is what's called the baseline trick, and this comes straight from the FBI playbook. The idea is actually super simple, but it is incredibly powerful. You just can't spot what's abnormal if you don't know what's normal for that person. So here's the deal. You have to watch how a person acts when they're just relaxed, talking about something totally neutral like the weather. That's their baseline. So if they're normal, is looking you right in the eye and talking a mile a minute, but suddenly when you ask them a tough question, they're staring at the floor and talking super slow, that deviation, that change, that's your first major red flag.
Okay, so our next tool builds right on top of this. It's called the magic question. See, most of us, we ask questions that are just way too easy to lie to. Simple yes or no stuff. This technique, though, it forces the other person to really think. And that's exactly where liars start to get all tripped up.
Just look at the difference here. A weak question like, "Did you go out?" can be shut down with a simple, easy no. But now look at the strong question. "What made you stay out so late last night?" See what you did there? You're assuming they went out. Now they're trapped. They're either forced to fess up or they have to invent a whole complicated story on the spot. And trust me, that is much, much harder to do convincingly.
All right, let's move on to the involuntary signals. This is the fun stuff. When someone lies, their body is actually under a lot of stress. And that stress, it leaks out in ways they just can't control. You just have to know what you're looking for. And this is where the 5-second rule comes into play. When you ask a really direct question, those first 5 seconds of their response are pure gold. Seriously, this is the critical window where their brain is fighting its hardest to push down the truth and build a lie. So here's how it works. You ask your question, and you just watch them. But, and this is the key, one single tell by itself means absolutely nothing. Anyone might scratch their nose, right? But what if they suddenly break eye contact, touch their face, and their voice goes up a pitch all within those 5 seconds? That cluster of tells, that's a massive sign that something is just not right. Have you ever been in a conversation where the subject just suddenly changes for no reason at all? Well, that's often what we call the topic swerve. You can think of it as the brain's panic button. When a liar feels like you're getting a little too close to the truth, they'll try to derail the whole conversation. They'll hit you with something totally out of left field, like, "Hey, did you see that funny video I sent you?" They are desperately trying to get you off their trail. Your job is to not let them. You just gently, but firmly, guide them right back. "Yeah, we can talk about that later, but first, tell me more about," and then just watch how uncomfortable they get. Okay, so we've covered observing them and reading their little panic signals. Now we get to move into the most active phase, setting clever verbal traps that liars will walk right into without even realizing it. Let's start with the word trick. Here's a secret. Liars hate commitment. They always want to leave themselves an escape route, so they avoid using direct, confident language. Instead, they use these weak, non-committal, kinda wishy-washy words. Just listen to the huge difference here. "I was at home," that's a fact. But "I think I was probably at home," that is full of doubt. So you want to listen for words like think, probably, maybe, or I guess. They're huge red flags because it shows they don't have any confidence in their own statement, usually because they're making it up as they go. Now this next technique takes advantage of a liar's biggest weakness, their memory. I mean, it's hard enough to remember the truth, right? But it's incredibly difficult to keep a fake story perfectly consistent over time. The process here is really simple. You ask about an event, you change the subject, talk about something else for a bit, and then you circle back later with a more specific question. A truthful person, well, they're just recalling a real memory, so their answers are going to line up. A liar, on the other hand, is trying to recall a fake story, and they often forget the little details they just invented minutes before. And
That's when their whole story just falls apart.
Okay, now this next trick, it's almost unfair, seriously. It works because it directly targets the massive amount of brain power it takes to lie. Lying takes a ton of mental energy, and this trick is designed to basically overload their system.
So while they're in the middle of telling their pre-planned, rehearsed story, you just interrupt them with a completely random question about what happened before the story even started. This forces their brain to stop fabricating the current story and try to invent a new one right there on the spot. Most people just can't handle it. They'll get confused, they'll contradict themselves, or their story will just completely change.
And finally, our last verbal trap. This one is pretty clever. It involves intentionally feeding them a piece of false information and just sitting back and watching how they react to it.
So if you say something like, "And it was raining then, right?" a truthful person who's recalling an actual memory will immediately correct you. They'll say, "No, it was sunny." But a liar? They don't want to create any conflict or risk getting caught, so they will often just agree with your fake detail to seem more cooperative. Yeah, it was raining. And that's when you've got them.
So after all that, here's the thing. Don't think of these as 8 separate tricks. You have to think of them as one comprehensive toolkit. You've just learned how to observe people, how to read their panic signals, and how to set verbal traps. It's almost like you've just gained a new 6th sense for conversation.
And here it is, your complete lie detection toolkit, from establishing that crucial baseline all the way to catching them with a little fake detail. Start practicing these, combine them with your own intuition, that gut feeling that something's off, and you will be absolutely amazed at what you start to notice.
Look, this isn't about becoming cynical or paranoid. It's just about seeing the world a little more clearly. It's about understanding the real conversations that are happening just beneath the surface. So the only question left is, now that you can see the strings, what are you going to notice?